Hello, my fellow fallible humans. My name is Tanya McIntyre, and this is the Red Roof Recovery Show, a program to soften the path of recovery from substance and behavioral addictions. I'm a SMART recovery facilitator. SMART is an acronym that stands for Self-Management and Recovery Training. I host weekly meetings to teach people about cognitive therapies that have certainly helped in my path of recovery. I actually prefer to call it a path of discovery now that I'm into it for a few years. In my decade of recovery from my own drug and alcohol addictions, I've discovered that there are literally hundreds of tools to choose from in the recovery world. And the key, I think, is another of my favorite acronyms. Key, keep educating yourself. The key is to find something that works for you. And then when you find it, you grab on with both hands and you do it every single day. On today's episode of Red Roof Recovery, I'm joined by my best friend and life partner, Sir Lancelot. Lance, thanks so much for being here with me.
You're welcome, my love.
And Lance brings a family perspective to my recovery discovery world. Lance stood by me through my decades of addictions, and people appreciate hearing his family perspective of someone who is not challenged by any kind of addiction, thankfully, and how he still lives with me, manages to live with me quite happily and blissfully while I learn how to become sober, not only just physically, but also emotionally. That's a whole different ballgame.
So emotional growth. Yeah. Yeah.
Did you want to say something?
Coping with those feelings that you've never had to cope with.
Yes, those heightened emotions that I numbed for most of my adult life with drugs and alcohol. Today, we're going to chat about something that took me many years to finally accept, and that is acceptance, unconditional acceptance. It's one thing to put a lot of conditions on acceptance of ourselves, of others, and of life, but to reach a point where you can be to a point of acceptance unconditionally is something that I still work on every day. And I appreciate your support in helping me get through that.
I think everyone works on that every day.
Yeah, I think
it's
so.
It's very easy to accept people if they agree with you.
Right, if they behave the way we want and expect them to behave. Yeah, that makes it easy. So in cognitive therapy, which is the foundation of SMART recovery, self-management and recovery training, which I practice regularly. You'll often hear me say that AA saves my life and SMART gave me my life back. So we learn the principle of unconditional acceptance of ourselves, of others, and of life. And I would like to share with you something called an unconditional acceptance manifesto that I've compiled through a few things, through some of the mentors that have had influence in my life and through my recovery discovery. And another fellow facilitator at SMART, Nick Jacek, has contributed to this. And then just my own experiences. So we're going to start off with a definition of acceptance. What is acceptance? Well, the following definitions and ideas are provided by Drs. Wendy Dryden and Walter Matwichuk, both pioneers in the development and practice of REBT. REBT is a form of cognitive therapy. It stands for Rational Emotive Behavioral Therapy. And they agree that to accept something is to, one, acknowledge that it exists, which sounds reasonable. And that's what rational emotive behavior therapy is. It's supposed to be reasonable for us to comprehend. Number two, we acknowledge that all the conditions are in place for it to exist. Again, sounding reasonable. Number three, believe that while it's preferable for this reality perhaps to not exist, it doesn't follow that it must not exist. Number four, resolve to change the existing condition whenever possible. And number five, accept when it is beyond your control. And then we get to unconditional self-acceptance, and the acronym that is commonly referred to in recovery circles as the USA, which is one of the most difficult concepts, I think, for most of us to accept. It certainly has been for me. And the following is inspired by my fellow SMART facilitator, Nick Rajacek. And I encourage you, after listening to this, perhaps you make your own unconditional self-acceptance statement for you that you can read to yourself. Because in my experience, repetition has been crucial in reprogramming my mind. I'm, really kind of filling in those grooves, those neural networks that have been not helping me through my life, and I'm creating new pathways, smoothing them out as I go away with repetition to create pathways that are going to be more helpful in my recovery discovery journey. So here's unconditional self-acceptance. You have neither intrinsic worth or worthlessness, but merely aliveness. The complexity of self cannot be evaluated. Behavior can be evaluated, but not the complexity of self. Traits and behaviors can be measured and improved using the approach of what is within my control. Taking this approach is advantageous to your health because rating your totality of self is invalid and emotionally harmful. You acknowledge that there is no valid reason why you can't accept yourself fully, just by the fact that you're alive, and that there is a tremendous emotional advantage to your doing so. You will not use your unconditional self-acceptance as an excuse for self-serving misbehavior. You live in a social group after all. You accept that your acts have consequences. Regardless of what you do, however, you remain a unique, complex, fallible human who is in a constant state of change, a constant state of flux and flow. You also acknowledge that for these reasons of uniqueness, complexity, and change, you cannot validly rate your totality, personhood, or self. At the same time, unconditional self-acceptance is valid and helps your happiness and health. And then we go into the unconditional acceptance of others and life. We humans are now considered to be the most stressed, depressed, overweight, over-medicated population in history. And when referring to our physiology, stress is created by how our body is responding to life's circumstances. Stress can be created when we either regret the past, resist the present, or worry about the future. We can have desires for a different life that can constantly disturb our mind, or we can have a life that's fulfilling, full of opportunities, with a constant flow of gratitude for what we have. The only difference between them is acceptance, acceptance of what is, with ourselves, with others, and with life. We can help ourselves be non-reactive, calm, and peaceful. We can strive to reach acceptance unconditionally with what is instead of what if. When we accept a situation, it is as it is. And when we don't accept a situation, it is as it is. The sting of pain is not in the pain, but rather in our non-acceptance of it. We feel it should not have been so, but it is. And that is the sting. The suffering comes from wanting things to be other than they are. We think that we can resist certain states because they're there, but they're actually there because we resist them. What we resist persists. Accept it. When you accept, you remain above and beyond. And when you fight and resist, you come to that same level. There are some things and situations which can be changed, and there are some things and situations which cannot be changed, but rather only accepted. Acceptance is the door to transcendence. Practice acceptance and be patient and persistent. That is my unconditional acceptance manifesto that I read every day. It's how I start my day. And it helps with the repetition of that message and the reprogramming of my mind to serve me in healthier ways.
Okay, so with the unconditional self-acceptance,
Yes.
as we all know, we're not the same person. Well, this is why I think I'm definitely not the same person I was at 20 years old, or 30, or 40 years old, or 50 years old.
Mm-hmm.
As you always put it, we're in flux and flow. We change because time is running out. Life experiences have taught you things. So to accept oneself is, it's an ongoing thing.
Absolutely.
A lot of views that we had when we were 20 years old, we do not still hold at 60 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So, to accept yourself it's ongoing.
Yeah,
It's
ever-changing.
not something you think, great, I've accepted myself, I'm done.
Right.
One should always question. I think it was Tim mentioned, said opinions and views and perspective should be a bit like bumholes. They should be aired out continuously. You should view them.
Yes, interesting analogy there, honey.
Yeah, you need to view and air your views out to make sure that there's nothing wrong with them.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah.
Because self-acceptance, accepting of anything really, is an ongoing thing.
Mm-hmm. Question everything. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, especially yourself.
Yeah.
I think that's the main thing. Yeah, because that's all we can control.
Mm-hmm.
I find a lot of other people's views somewhat unacceptable.
Mm-hmm.
However, what can I do about changing their view?
Yeah.
There's nothing. We can have a discussion, but I've never found that discussion goes that well unless the other person is willing to reflect on their perspective.
Mm-hmm. Someone just sent me a meme actually that I just went looking for that pertains to what you've just mentioned there. You must always be willing to truly consider evidence that contradicts your beliefs and admit the possibility that you may be wrong. Intelligence isn't knowing everything, it's the ability to challenge everything you know. I like that. It reminds me that our truth is a fundamental reality defined by our perceived experiences, and I think it's important for us to develop that critical thinking that really wasn't taught to me in my education at any time. I didn't start developing critical thinking until I was introduced to SMART. SMART recovery taught me, the cognitive therapies to question my thoughts, question everything. And that I think has created a smoother foundation for me to walk that path of recovery.
Well, I think that's where media that is, shall we say, governed by someone else. As in, let's take radio. Most people I'm afraid in North America, everyone has there's a country music channel and a classic rock channel. Where in the UK, where I was growing up, it was basically, there was a classical channel, but then music from in the mainstream networks was an amalgamation of everything. So you're exposed to many different genres of music. What we have now, I think, which isn't helping the situation that we find ourselves in, questioning everything, is that because of technology, we tend to inhabit echo chambers. We don't expose ourselves to different views. And then when we come up against different views, people have trouble with that because they've not been exposed to many different people's many different views.
I hear the term confirmation bias a lot, right? So we seek out information that confirms our bias, which is not healthy either, to create healthy dialogues that could open our mind to different possibilities.
Hmm. And when you do run into someone who's willing to have a dialogue, a constructive dialogue, to realize that you may be wrong. And I've always said to people, if I've got a certain view, I'm open to you challenging that view and changing my mind with a rational argument.
Mm-hmm.
If you cannot change my point of view because I don't find your argument strong enough to change my view, I've got no problem with you holding the opposing view,
Mm-hmm.
because obviously my argument is not strong enough to change your mind. And it's okay for people to have different views.
Mm-hmm.
So and as I said, we need to challenge our own views, to look at them in a way that, as I said, my views now, 60 something, they're definitely not the same as they were when I was 20 something.
Yeah. Thank goodness. I think if we had met in our 20s, or we probably would have not had that synergy that we had when we were in our 30s. I'm certainly, thank goodness, I'm not the person I was in my 20s. I wasn't a very nice person when I was in my 20s. I'm glad that's behind me.
Well, obviously that's your perspective,
right? Yeah.
you know,
And shared by a few others. Yes.
yeah, but you everyone tends to be harder on themselves than other people are
Mm-hmm.
on you. So you're being very hard on yourself, as most people are, and you were going through your challenges, or the beginning of your challenges, which colors your perspective somewhat.
Well, I'm certainly glad that therapy as a whole now is, I remember when we first got together when I was 30, when we got married, which is more than 30 years ago. And therapy, I remember when we tried to live in the UK, and when I first arrived there as a Canadian, I thought, how different could it be, right? Canada was a British colony for so long. It's like, we've got all our influences really from the British. But it was culture shock in more ways than one, specifically with the class structure and certain attitudes, especially around therapy at the time. Because I read a lot of self-help books, because of course I was swimming in that river of denial, right? Denial is more than the big river in Egypt. So when my addictions were progressing through my 30s, I was reaching out for some self-help through self-help books. I mean, I was brought up on philosophy as well. I call my father philosopher dad for most of my life, right? I ended up writing a couple of books in his honor, because I was brought up with philosophy. So self-help was nothing new to me. But when I tried to talk to your parents about self-help and how they could maybe do some introspection around their challenges with your brother, I was shut down, because it's not something, it's that stiff upper lip British attitude that was difficult for me to accept. Talk about unconditional other acceptance, right?
Yeah, there definitely was. And again, that could just become because they came from a different time.
Oh, absolutely.
They grew up in a world where there was no time for self-pity, and things were happening that were totally out of your control, and you had to deal with them.
Right.
So there was a totally different mindset, I think. And even that, when I was young, if someone said they were going to therapy, everyone rolled their eyes and thought there was something very wrong with them. I think that's changing somewhat. I think the further we go from that's, some might say, misplaced stoicism from like the war generations,
Mm.
The further we get away from that, the less what you call stiff upper lip there is,
Mm-hmm.
and more access to therapy and all the other contagions that go with it.
Well, I'm exposed now to more because through the pandemic, everybody's life kind of migrated to digital communication. So here we are on the Zoom world now, I call it. And of course, I do a lot of Smart Recovery online meetings, and I'm exposed to Smart Recovery UK. They have a huge contingent there. Through the pandemic, of course, Smart has grown exponentially because addiction and suicide rates have tripled over the past couple of years. And as I'm exposed to people from that continent, I can appreciate now that, you know, therapy, really, we're looking at therapy as essentially just adult education with some creative problem solving. And we're doing it more and more in a group setting, which I think is valuable in so many ways.
Yeah, to talk to people who have the same challenges and to brainstorm on ways that people have overcome those challenges, or found ways to mitigate certain parts of the circumstance.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a very powerful tool. I think there's in some ways we've gained a lot, in some ways we've lost some stuff. I mean, when you're face to face with someone, the communication is a lot deeper.
Right. Mhm.
However, technology is far more reaching.
Yeah.
There are pros and cons to everything.
Mhm.
That's where your cost benefit analysis comes in.
Yes.
Because every situation has a pro and a con. Doesn't
Right.
matter how good the situation you're choosing to do, there is a downside to it.
Mm. The cost benefit analysis is a tool of cognitive therapy that encourages you to get all the thoughts out of your head and get them onto a piece of paper, which is always, I think, a helpful exercise. So the cost benefit analysis, you don't even really need a template. You just need a piece of paper, and you just put an X in there to make 4 quadrants. And in the top 2 quadrants, you want to put the costs and benefits of continuing to do something. And then the bottom 2 quadrants, the costs and benefits of not continuing to do something. So we just actually went through this with Lancelot here to convince him to retire sooner than later, because he was still a few years away, a couple of years away from retirement, but he was going to a job he hated every day. We were living apart through the week because he had to stay in the city to get to the job, and it just wasn't a good quality of life. However, financial insecurity keeps us trapped in situations, sadly. But once we sat down and did a cost benefit analysis of what was the actual cost of keeping that job and continuing to live that way, and the benefits of not doing it. And we did it for about 3-4 weeks running.
Oh, more than that.
I was being conservative.
You were being very conservative. We were doing these things for months.
Yeah.
The thing is, we do a cost benefit analysis in our head for every situation.
Yeah.
It's only the big ones that you really need to sit down and do a proper cost benefit analysis. Go and buy a new car. You do a cost benefit analysis in your head. Can I afford it? Is it the right car for me? Is it worth doing? Putting some money into the old car. But we don't call it a cost benefit analysis. Just that they're just normal thoughts.
Pros and cons. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We all do it all the time. When the big one comes and there are multiple factors, you can't hold all the factors in your head at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So to put it down on paper, to actually visually see all the pros and cons in one space is very helpful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So have we solved the world's problems on unconditional acceptance? Have we gotten?
No, I mean, the thing about acceptance is, as I said, it's an ongoing thing.
Mm.
You can't say, yep, I've accepted, because there will be a situation that you find so far out of the acceptable range of your views that you will struggle to accept it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, what's just happened with the death of Queen Elizabeth?
Mm.
Now, I wasn't a tremendous monarch. I thought, you know, she did what she did very well. Not totally in favour of monarchy, but I think a constitutional monarchy shrunk down is a good thing. However, when people stand up and shout abuse and that at a, you know, basically at a coffin going past, I find that totally acceptable. I find it reprehensible. Can I see it in my, you know, so trying to accept the people doing it because their views are so far of, you know, common decency is so far away from mine, I struggle with that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so everyone has a struggle with accepting things that are so far away from what we consider right.
Right, against their morals, yeah. So moral values, you know, we've seen how those have evolved from, you know, centuries before, where, for instance, talking about the royal family, how divorce was just, there's just no way you could accept divorce
No.
in your family, which is why one of the kings abdicated to go marry a divorcee. So, you know, we've seen through decades and centuries that, you know, attitudes around moral failings can change as we evolve as humanity. And then sometimes we stay stuck.
And sometimes we regress.
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed. Well, honey, we've only got like a couple of minutes left. Wow, this conversation goes quickly, and I'm so grateful to have it with you and to share my life with you. Thank you for being a wonderful life partner and human being. I am grateful.
It's a two-way street, but
Thank you, sweetheart. And thank you for being here with us for 30 minutes of your day for this non-renewable resource of time that we have. We really appreciate you hanging out with us. I hope this episode has opened up some possibilities for you to consider unconditional acceptance in your life for not just yourself, but also for others and for life. And if I can help you in any way, please reach out to me, redroofrecovery@gmail.com. I'm always happy to help you with any challenges you're going through, not only in just with your addiction recovery, just life in general. And if you would like to be a guest, or if you think someone might qualify for our unique 1-week residential recovery program, again, redroofrecovery@gmail.com. I've written a couple of books, some shameless self-promotion here. I've got Mindful Wisdom from My Philosopher Dad, Sage Advice from a Single Father, a legacy to my dad, who was an extraordinary man that deserves a legacy of greatness. And then during the pandemic, I wrote book 2, Daily Wisdom from My Philosopher Dad, to maintain my sanity and sobriety. I set this one up as a journal. So there's an inspirational saying there every day of the year. And I encourage you to not only just read the inspirational note, but also then write your thoughts and intentions for the day. The power of words is very powerful. And I find the power of the written word is life transformational. At least it has been for me. My wish for you is to always live fully, laugh often, love always, be mindful, and try to stay positive in this crazy world. Remember, there is great power in knowing that the only thing we can control in our lives is ourselves. May the force be with you, and remember, you are the force.